For decades, country music has been wrapped in charm, tradition, and Southern pride. But behind the rhinestones and the cowboy hats lurked whispers that refused to die. Some called them lies, others laughed them off as gossip. Yet, shockingly, many of these old country music rumors turned out to be true. Tonight, we're pulling back the curtain on a love of unbelievable stories that Nashville never wanted you to know. But history confirmed them all. Hank Williams Sr., the Opry band that was no rumor. When whispers spread in Nashville during the early 1950s that Hank Williams Sr. had been banned from the Grand Ole Opry, many fans dismissed it as just another cruel rumor. After all, Hank was country music's brightest star, the man whose mournful voice had captured America's heart. But the truth was far darker. His personal demons, fueled by relentless drinking and painkillers, weren't just gossip. They were destroying both his health and his career. Backstage at the Opry, stories circulated about Hank stumbling through rehearsals, showing up late or sometimes not at all. Fellow musicians covered for him, but the industry could only hide so much. Fans would see him slurring lyrics or collapsing mid-performance. What began as hushed talk among insiders soon spread like wildfire. Hank was becoming too unreliable for Nashville's most sacred stage. In August 1952, the rumor became reality. The Opry quietly dismissed Hank Williams, citing habitual drunkenness and missed shows. It wasn't just a punishment, it was exile. Being banned from the Opry in those days was like being cut off from the heart of country music itself. To outsiders, it seemed unthinkable. To insiders, it was inevitable. What made the story so shocking was how it tarnished the myth of country's golden boy. Hank wasn't just a singer, he was the embodiment of the genre's soul. His songs like "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" and "Your Cheating Heart" painted him as a man of sorrow, but fans didn't realize those lyrics came straight from his tortured reality. The Opry band stripped away the illusion, exposing the man behind the legend. Williams tried to recover, playing smaller venues and even being promised reinstatement if he could clean up, but he never did. On January 1st, 1953, Hank Williams Sr. died at just 29 years old, alone in the backseat of a Cadillac on his way to a show. The rumor that he had been cast out by Nashville wasn't just true. It became a symbol of how the industry often turns its back on the very icons it builds. Today, the story serves as one of country music's most haunting lessons. Talent can make you a legend, but demons can take it all away. Hank's ban from the Opry is no longer a whispered rumor. It's a documented tragedy in the annals of Nashville history. Patsy Cline, the whispered affairs behind the voice. In the early 1960s, Patsy Cline was more than a singer. She was the voice that gave Nashville its soul. With hits like "Crazy" and "I Fall to Pieces," she embodied the heartache that defined kind country music. But behind the spotlight, rumors swirled that Patsy's private life wasn't as spotless as the press portrayed. Whispers claimed she carried on affairs even while married to Charlie Dick. For years, fans dismissed it as ugly gossip aimed at tearing down a woman who dared to rise too high. The truth, however, was far more complicated and far more human. Friends within the tight-knit Nashville circle quietly confirmed that Patsy's marriage was turbulent. Charlie was known for his heavy drinking, quick temper, and jealous streak. Patsy, fiery and independent, refused to be the submissive wife Nashville expected her to be. This clash spilled into the public eye, fueling speculation about infidelity. Private letters, later revealed by close friends, painted a clearer picture. Patsy was open about her frustrations, her longing for tenderness, and her disillusionment with her marriage. In these candid writings, she admitted to seeking companionship outside of her home. Affairs that had once been whispered about in hushed tones were, in fact, a reality. What shocked fans wasn't that Patsy strayed. It was that the woman who gave the world such heartbreaking songs of devotion also lived in the shadows of betrayal and loneliness. Yet, her affairs didn't diminish her artistry. If anything, they made her music feel even more real. When she sang of broken trust, of love slipping through fingers, listeners believed her because she wasn't just performing, she was living it. Her songs were the soundtrack of her own battles, wrapped in melodies that made millions weep. But Nashville, conservative and image-obsessed, never wanted that truth exposed. For decades, the industry kept her affairs a guarded secret. Only later, through biographies and the testimonies of those closest to her, did the rumors become undeniable fact. And in a sense, that revelation made Patsy Cline more relatable, not less. She was no saint, but she was deeply, achingly human. Tragically, Patsy's life was cut short in a 1963 plane crash at just 30 years old. The affairs she carried on remain a footnote in her story, overshadowed by her voice that still echoes across generations. The rumor that once threatened to tarnish her image now stands as part of the truth. Patsy Cline's music came from a place of raw honesty, born out of the very passions and mistakes that defined her. Johnny Cash, the Man in Black and the Forest Fire. Johnny Cash built his image as the Man in Black, a brooding outlaw whose gravelly voice carried both rebellion and redemption. By the mid-1960s, his legend was already cemented. But behind that persona lay one of the most shocking country music rumors of all time, that Johnny Cash had started a massive forest fire while on a drunken bender. For years, fans whispered about the story, half believing it was just another wild exaggeration attached to Cash's outlaw image. But the truth was more devastating than anyone imagined. In 1965, Cash's life was spiraling. Addicted to pills, drinking heavily, and battling relentless demons, he often sought escape in the wilderness. On one trip to Los Padres National Forest in California, a careless accident turned into catastrophe. Cash, under the haze of drugs and alcohol, claimed his camper caught fire. The blaze quickly spread, consuming more than 500 acres of pristine land and devastating local wildlife. At first, Cash denied everything, brushing off accusations as wild rumors designed to smear his name. But when federal authorities investigated, the truth emerged. Eyewitnesses confirmed the fire had started from his campsite, and Cash eventually admitted his responsibility. The damage was staggering. Over 40% of the rare California condor habitat was destroyed, and countless animals perished in the flames. What shocked fans was not just the destruction, but Cash's unapologetic attitude at the time. In court, when asked about the condors, he infamously retorted, "I don't care about your damn yellow buzzards." The comment, meant to downplay the tragedy, painted him in a darker light than the outlaw persona he had carefully cultivated. To many, it was proof that the rumors weren't just true. They revealed a man dangerously out of control. Cash was fined more than $80,000, a fortune at the time, though much of it went unpaid. His reputation took a hit, fueling the image of a man teetering on the edge of destruction. Ironically, this scandal also reinforced his outlaw mythology, making him both feared and admired by fans who loved the danger in his music. Years later, Cash expressed regret, admitting that his addictions had nearly ruined his life. His transformation, finding faith, marrying June Carter, and resurrecting his career was all the more powerful because it rose from such a dark past. The forest fire, once dismissed as an unbelievable rumor, became a chilling chapter in his legacy, proof of how self-destruction can spiral into disaster. Today, the Los Padres fire stands as one of the most infamous events in country music lore. It wasn't a tall tale or industry gossip. It was a shocking truth that revealed just how far the outlaw life could burn. Loretta Lynn, songs born from a troubled marriage. Loretta Lynn, the coal miner's daughter who rose from poverty in Kentucky to become one of country music's greatest voices, built her reputation on honesty. Her songs spoke to women in a way few dared to, raw, unpolished, and fearless. But behind that honesty was a rumor that shadowed her career, that her most iconic songs were not just fiction, but painfully true reflections of a marriage scarred by abuse and betrayal. For years, listeners speculated that Lynn's turbulent lyrics were pulled directly from her own life with Oliver Doolittle Lynn, the man she married at just 15. Stories swirled of shouting matches, his drinking, and even violence behind closed doors. Fans wondered, was "Don't Come Home a-Drinkin' with Lovin' on Your Mind" more than just a clever lyric? Was Fist City an echo of Loretta's own rage at her husband's wandering eye? At the time, many dismissed such talk as cruel gossip. But as Loretta grew older, she stopped hiding. In interviews and in her autobiography, Coal Miner's Daughter, she confirmed what the whispers had long suggested. Doolittle had indeed been an unfaithful, hot-tempered man. He drank heavily, cheated repeatedly, and sometimes turned violent. Loretta admitted she fought back just as fiercely, sometimes throwing fists of her own. The marriage was volatile. Yet remarkably, it endured for nearly 50 years. The shocking truth was that her songs were not exaggerated melodrama. They were diary entries set to music. Fist City came from real jealousy toward women chasing her husband. Don't Come Home a Drinkin' was her anthem of defiance against a man who stumbled through the door expecting affection after nights out. And You Ain't Woman Enough to Take My Man was directed squarely at one of Doolittle's mistresses. What fans once believed were clever marketing hooks were, in fact, the unfiltered truths of a woman surviving a rough marriage. What makes this rumor-turned-fact so striking is how Loretta transformed personal pain into empowerment. Rather than hide the turmoil, she used it to give voice to millions of women living similar lives. In an era when country music often painted women as submissive, Loretta Lynn was writing anthems of resistance. Her honesty shocked Nashville, but it made her a legend. Even after confirming the hardships, Loretta never painted Doolittle as a villain. She acknowledged his faults, but also credited him with pushing her to chase her dreams. Their marriage was messy, sometimes toxic, yet it was the foundation of the music that made her immortal. The rumor that Loretta Lynn's music was pulled from her own bruises and heartbreak wasn't gossip. It was the raw truth. And in revealing it, she didn't tarnish her legacy. She cemented it as one of the most authentic voices in country music history. Conway Twitty, the man who wasn't born. Conway. When fans first heard the name Conway Twitty, they assumed it was as natural as his smooth baritone voice. Twitty became one of country music's greatest crooners, with chart-topping hits like Hello Darlin' and It's Only Make Believe. But for years, whispers circled that Conway Twitty was a carefully manufactured persona, and that the man behind the name had hidden his past. What sounded like harmless industry gossip turned out to be shockingly true. Born Harold Lloyd Jenkins in Friars Point, Mississippi, in 1933, Twitty grew up dreaming of both music and baseball. After a short stint in minor league baseball, his ambitions turned fully toward music. But Harold Jenkins was hardly the kind of name that record executives thought could sell millions of records. The rumor that he abandoned his birth name to reinvent himself was, in fact, true, and the story of how he did it is as fascinating as his music. According to Twitty himself, the name change was inspired during a road trip when he spotted Conway, Arkansas on a highway sign and later saw Twitty, Texas. The two names combined into the stage persona that would eventually define him. It was a bold move, erasing Harold Jenkins and crafting a new identity that sounded both unique and unforgettable. To the public, Conway Twitty sounded like a man born to sing country ballads. But behind the glamour, the reinvention raised eyebrows in Nashville. Some whispered that Twitty wanted to distance himself from his rock and roll past. Before conquering country, he had been a teen idol in the 1950s, scoring a #1 pop hit with It's Only Make Believe. His leap from rock to country wasn't seamless, and Nashville insiders questioned whether his heart truly belonged to the genre. Was Conway Twitty just a mask Harold Jenkins wore to gain acceptance? What stunned fans was not just the fact that he changed his name, but how fully he embodied his new identity. Twitty never looked back. By the 1970s and 1980s, he was a staple of country radio, racking up more #1 singles than almost anyone in history. The man born Harold Jenkins had, in a sense, vanished, replaced entirely by the persona he created. This rumor, once dismissed as trivial, revealed a deeper truth about country music stars. Image and reinvention mattered just as much as talent. By shedding his old identity, Conway Twitty ensured his place in history. And while Harold Jenkins may have been the man, Conway Twitty became the legend. Tammy Wynette, the truth behind Stand By Your Man. Few songs in country music history have carried as much weight or controversy as Tammy Wynette's Stand By Your Man. Released in 1968, it became her signature hit, a ballad urging women to forgive and support their husbands despite flaws or mistakes. For decades, critics accused Wynette of endorsing submissiveness, while fans defended the song as heartfelt and timeless. But swirling behind the song was a persistent rumor that Tammy Wynette never truly wanted to record it at all, that she was pressured into singing a song she didn't even believe in. At first, the claim seemed like idle Nashville gossip. Why would the First Lady of country music regret the very song that made her a household name? But over time, the truth emerged, and it shocked even her most loyal admirers. Wynette herself admitted in later interviews that she had serious reservations about Stand By Your Man. She worried that its message was outdated even then, that women would see her as weak rather than strong. The song's producer and co-writer, Billy Sherrill, pushed hard for it. He believed it was destined to be a hit, regardless of Wynette's hesitation. In the male-dominated world of Nashville, her doubts held little weight. The label executives agreed with Sherrill, insisting that she record it. Reluctantly, Wynette stepped into the studio and gave the song her soaring, unmistakable voice. What followed was both triumph and torment. Stand By Your Man shot to the top of the charts, securing Wynette's place as a superstar. Yet the lyrics became a burden she carried for the rest of her career. Feminist groups denounced the song, accusing her of setting women back decades. Wynette, herself no stranger to troubled marriages, she would marry 5 times, was haunted by the irony. The woman who sang so convincingly about loyalty and forgiveness had lived through betrayal, divorce, and heartbreak. The shocking truth is that the rumor was right. Tammy Wynette had been pressured into recording the song. It wasn't her manifesto. It was her assignment. And while it brought her fortune and fame, it also shackled her image. For years, she was forced to defend herself, insisting that the song didn't reflect her personal beliefs, but rather told a story, as country songs so often do. In the end, Stand By Your Man became bigger than Tammy Wynette herself, a cultural flashpoint, an anthem for some, and a lightning rod for others. The rumor that she never wanted to sing it wasn't just gossip. It was fact, confirmed by Wynette's own words. And that makes the song's legacy all the more complex. A timeless classic born out of doubt, pressure, and reluctant compromise. George Jones, The Lawnmower Ride That Was No Joke. George Jones, known as the Possum, was one of country music's most gifted vocalists and also one of its most troubled souls. His voice could break hearts, but his demons nearly broke him. In Nashville circles, one rumor stood out for decades, whispered with a mix of humor and sadness, that Jones was once so desperate for alcohol after his wife had hidden the car keys that he drove a riding lawnmower down the highway to the liquor store. For years, fans thought it was nothing more than a tall tale. Surely, even George Jones couldn't have done something so outrageous. But the rumor was true, shockingly, undeniably true. In his autobiography, I Live to Tell It All, Jones confirmed the story himself. The scene unfolded in the late 1960s, during one of the darkest periods of his drinking. His then-wife, Shirley Ann Corley, had grown desperate to control his binges. She hid the car keys, thinking she could keep him from getting to town. But George, determined to satisfy his craving, looked outside at the only set of wheels available, a small riding lawnmower. Jones climbed on, cranked the engine, and puttered off down Highway 6 in Texas, traveling several miles at a crawl while cars honked and swerved to avoid him. When he finally rolled up to the liquor store, locals couldn't believe their eyes. The image of one of country music's brightest stars inching down the road on a lawnmower became legend almost instantly. What made the story both hilarious and tragic was how perfectly it captured Jones's relationship with alcohol. His addiction was no joke. It wrecked marriages, ruined concerts, and nearly destroyed his career. Yet in moments like this, his determination, however misguided, seemed almost comical. Fans laughed at the absurdity, but those who knew him saw only desperation. In later years, Jones admitted that the lawnmower ride symbolized the depths of his dependence. He even joked about it himself, eventually allowing the story to become part of his public image. Still, the reality behind the laughter was grim. This was a man whose craving for alcohol was so powerful, he risked humiliation and danger to satisfy it. Jones would eventually find redemption, thanks in large part to his marriage to Nancy Sepulvado, who helped him sober up in the 1980s. But the lawnmower rumor remains one of the most enduring tales in country music. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. The shocking part is that what seemed like a ridiculous Baroom story turned out to be an honest glimpse into the self-destructive spiral of a legend. George Jones didn't just live the rumor. He confirmed it, turning it into one of the strangest yet most human chapters of his unforgettable legacy. Willie Nelson, a high moment in the White House. Willie Nelson has always worn his outlaw image proudly. His braids, his bandana, and his unshakable grin became symbols of country music's rebel spirit. But no rumor captured the imagination of fans quite like the one that swirled around Washington, D.C. in the late 1970s, that Willie Nelson had smoked marijuana inside the White House. At first, many dismissed it as an outlandish tale, a bit of stoner fantasy attached to the man most associated with cannabis. Surely, no one could sneak such a thing past the Secret Service. The truth, however, was as wild as the rumor. In his 1988 autobiography, Willie, an autobiography, Nelson confirmed it without hesitation. The year was 1978, and he had been invited to perform at a White House event during President Jimmy Carter's administration. Carter, a friend and admirer of Nelson's music, extended the honor warmly. While there, one of Carter's sons, Chip Carter, took Nelson on a late-night tour of the executive mansion. What happened next became legend. As Nelson later described, he and Chip found themselves on the roof of the White House, looking out over Washington, D.C. Nelson pulled out a joint and lit it up, puffing away under the stars, just a few yards from the most powerful residence in the world. The idea that the outlaw of country music got high on the roof of the White House was not a fan's wild exaggeration. It was fact. The revelation shocked many, not least because it challenged the pristine image the White House tried to project. Yet, in a strange way, it fit perfectly with Nelson's character. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful. He was simply being himself, no matter the setting. The rumor showed how unshakable his authenticity really was. The incident also fed into Nelson's long, complicated history with marijuana. For decades, he has been one of its most outspoken advocates, facing arrests, ridicule, and bans from venues. Instead of hiding it, Nelson embraced it as part of his brand, a symbol of freedom and rebellion. That night at the White House became the ultimate proof. Willie Nelson didn't just talk the talk, he lived it, even in the most unlikely places. Looking back, Nelson has chuckled about the memory, turning what could have been a scandal into one of country music's greatest outlaw anecdotes. The shocking truth is that one of America's most beloved singers got high on the roof of the president's home, and the world only loved him more for it. Dolly Parton. The Husband He Sees. Dolly Parton is one of the most recognizable figures in the world. Her glittering outfits, her larger-than-life personality, and her endless catalog of songs have made her a global icon. Yet for decades, Nashville buzzed with one peculiar rumor, that her husband, Carl Dean, was practically invisible. Fans wondered, did he even exist? Or was he just a convenient story Dolly told the press to avoid prying into her personal life? The speculation grew so persistent that many simply believed Carl Dean was a myth. The truth, however, is both stranger and more fascinating. Dolly did marry Carl Thomas Dean in 1966, long before she became a superstar. Unlike Dolly, Carl wanted no part of fame. He was a reclusive man who ran an asphalt paving business in Nashville and avoided the spotlight at all costs. While Dolly was dazzling audiences on the Grand Ole Opry stage, Carl preferred the quiet life, rarely attending her shows and almost never appearing in public with her. For decades, the lack of sightings fueled rumors that Dolly had fabricated the marriage or that the couple had long since separated. But Dolly, in her trademark humor, often laughed off the whispers. She confirmed repeatedly that her marriage was real and strong, even if unconventional. Friends close to the couple corroborated the truth. Carl adored Dolly, but had no interest in her public world. Their love thrived in privacy, away from cameras and headlines. In fact, Dolly has described their bond as the foundation of her stability. Carl, she said, was her anchor, the man who loved her as Dolly the person, not Dolly the star. The fact that the public rarely saw him wasn't proof of absence. It was proof of how fiercely he protected their private life. Even their wedding photos remained hidden for years, feeding the rumor mill until Dolly herself revealed them decades later. What made the truth so shocking was how successfully Carl Dean resisted fame. In an industry where family members are often pulled into the spotlight, he remained a mystery by choice. While some speculated Dolly kept him hidden for marketing reasons, the reality was much simpler. Carl Dean never wanted the world's attention, and Dolly respected that. Today, more than 55 years into their marriage, Dolly jokes that she's still madly in love with the most romantic man I know, even if fans have never heard him speak. The rumor that Carl Dean was a ghostly figure in Dolly's life wasn't just gossip. It was true, but by design. In a world where fame consumes everything, Dolly and Carl proved that sometimes love shines brightest when nobody's watching. Elvis Presley, the country roots of the king. Elvis Presley is immortalized as the king of rock and roll, the swiveling hip rebel who changed music forever. But long before Las Vegas residencies and screaming teenage fans, a rumor circulated in Nashville that Elvis's heart had once been firmly set on country music, not rock. Some claim that his earliest dreams were to be a country singer, performing on the same stages as Hank Williams and Lefty Frizzell. To many, this sounded like revisionist history, an attempt to tie rock's greatest star back to Nashville's tradition. Yet the truth is shockingly undeniable. Elvis Presley began as a country hopeful. In 1954, a young Elvis walked to the Grand Ole Opry, hoping to impress the country establishment. He auditioned with his blend of gospel, blues, and country twang, but the Opry wasn't impressed. Legend has it that a manager told him afterward, "Son, you'd be better off going back to driving a truck." It was a crushing blow. For Elvis, who idolized country legends, it was proof that Nashville didn't see him as one of their own. Instead, Elvis took his talents to the Louisiana Hayride, a rival radio program that embraced his raw energy and unconventional sound. There, his mix of country rhythm and blues, and gospel flourished, an explosive cocktail that would soon be labeled rock and roll. But Elvis himself never denied his country roots. His first recordings at Sun Records included covers of country standards, and he often cited Hank Williams, Bill Monroe, and Ernest Tubb as inspirations. As his fame exploded, the rumor that Elvis wanted to be country became more than just speculation. In interviews, he admitted that his early dream was to stand shoulder to shoulder with Nashville's heroes. Even at the height of his rock superstardom, Elvis continued recording country songs, scoring hits on both the country and pop charts. Tracks like I Forgot to Remember to Forget and later Kentucky Rain proved his deep love for the genre never faded. What makes this truth so startling is how history has painted Elvis solely as a rock icon, erasing his genuine connection to country. Yet those who knew him best recalled how often he returned to country ballads in private moments. Country was not a stepping stone. It was the soil from which his artistry grew. So yes, the rumor was true. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, once dreamed of being a country star. Nashville may have rejected him, but in doing so, it inadvertently set him on the path to becoming the most famous musician the world has ever known. Merle Haggard, the prison bars behind the outlaw. Merle Haggard was one of the greatest storytellers in country music, a voice of the working class whose songs spoke of hardship, redemption, and pride. But through much of his early career, a rumor clung to him like a shadow, that Haggard hadn't just sung about outlaws, he had actually been one. Fans whispered that he had done hard time in prison, a claim many thought was part of Nashville's outlaw marketing machine. Surely, they figured, it was just an image built to sell records. The shocking truth? The rumor was absolutely real. Before he became a legend, Haggard had been a convicted criminal, serving time in California's infamous San Quentin prison. As a boy growing up in Depression-era California, Merle's life was marked by struggle. His father died when Merle was just 9, leaving a restless, popped, rebellious teenager who found more comfort in trouble than in school. By his teens, he was already hopping freight trains, stealing cars, and running from the law. Arrests piled up, petty theft, burglary, and eventually a failed attempt to rob a roadhouse. By 1957, he was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. The rumor that he had been behind bars wasn't exaggerated. It was cold fact. At San Quentin, Haggard found himself among hardened criminals, and the reality of prison life hit him hard. In a twist of fate, while serving time, he witnessed a performance by Johnny Cash, who had come to sing for the inmates. That concert lit a fire inside Haggard, showing him that music could be a path out of despair. Haggard eventually earned parole in 1960, determined never to return. But his prison record remained a source of whispers in the country scene. When he began releasing songs like Branded Man and Sing Me Back Home, many believed he was just creating outlaw fantasies. In reality, those lyrics were drawn from his own scars. Branded Man, for example, came straight from the shame he felt when society treated him as a permanent criminal, even after paying his debt. When the truth finally emerged publicly that Merle Haggard had indeed served real time in San Quentin, it shocked fans who had assumed it was all myth. But instead of tarnishing him, it made his music more powerful. Unlike others who only played the part of the outlaw, Haggard had lived it. In the end, the rumor became his badge of authenticity. His songs carried the weight of experience, and his journey from prison inmate to country music Hall of Famer became one of the most inspiring redemption stories in the genre. The rumor wasn't just true. It was the very foundation of Merle Haggard's legacy.